The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Westlake Academy as Lynn stood at the entrance, clutching her worn backpack. The marble floors gleamed under her feet, so shiny she could almost see her reflection. Students brushed past her, their expensive shoes clicking against the polished surface, their voices echoing off the high ceilings. No one noticed the small 15-year-old girl frozen in place, trying to gather her courage. This was Lynn's first day at her new school, and everything about Westlake Academy screamed money and privilege. The building itself looked more like a fancy hotel than a school, with its grand staircases and portraits of important-looking people hanging on the walls. Lynn felt like she had accidentally wandered onto a movie set. She took a deep breath and pulled out the schedule she'd been given. Room 203, History with Mr. Patterson. Lynn made her way up the stairs, her eyes down, trying not to draw attention to herself. Her simple jeans and plain blue sweater stood out among the stylish outfits of her new classmates. She hadn't realized there would be such a difference, even though Westlake didn't require uniforms. The classroom was already half full when Lynn arrived. She slipped into a seat in the back corner, hoping to blend into the background. Two girls at the desk in front of her turned and gave her a quick once-over before returning to their conversation about someone's weekend party at a lake house. "I heard her dad works at that Chinese restaurant on Maple Street," one whispered, not quite quietly enough. "My mom says they live in that tiny apartment above it." Lynn pretended not to hear, focusing instead on arranging her notebooks neatly on her desk. It was true. Her family did live above Golden Dragon, the restaurant her parents had poured their life savings into after moving to America 7 years ago. She helped out there most evenings and weekends, taking orders and sometimes delivering food to nearby offices. It was honest work that her parents were proud of, but here in this school it might as well have been a shameful secret. The morning classes passed in a blur. Lynn answered questions when called on, her voice barely audible. She knew the material. She had always been a good student at her old public school, but here, surrounded by kids who seemed so confident, so at home in this world of wealth, she second-guessed everything she said. During lunch, Lynn found a quiet corner of the cafeteria to eat the food she'd brought from home. She watched as groups of friends laughed together at their tables, no one noticing her sitting alone. She didn't mind, really. It was better than having to explain why she couldn't join them at the mall after school, or why she never had the latest phone. Her afternoon schedule included a free study period. Not knowing where to go, Lynn followed a group of students who were heading toward what they called the Commons, a large open area with comfortable seating and study tables. As she walked through the hallway, a sound caught her attention. Someone was playing piano, the notes floating through an open door. Lynn paused, drawn to the music. She peered into the room and saw a beautiful grand piano in the center, its black surface gleaming under the lights. The room was empty now. Whoever had been playing had left. Without thinking, Lynn stepped inside. The music room was impressive, with tall windows and walls lined with all kinds of instruments. There were violins and cellos in cases, flutes and clarinets displayed on shelves, and even a harp in the corner. But it was the piano that pulled Lynn forward like a magnet. She approached it slowly, almost reverently. It was nothing like the old upright piano her grandmother had left them, the one that sat in the tiny storage room of their apartment. That piano was scratched and worn with yellowed keys and slightly out-of-tune strings. This one looked like it belonged in a concert hall. Lynn glanced around to make sure she was alone, then carefully set her backpack down. She reached out, her fingertips just barely touching the smooth keys without pressing down. A shiver ran through her. How many times had she dreamed of playing on a piano like this? Back home, Lynn practiced every night after finishing her homework and helping clean up the restaurant. She played in the dark storage room, sometimes with just a small lamp on so she wouldn't disturb her tired parents. She had taught herself using free videos online and old sheet music from the library. Sometimes she played so late her fingers would be stiff the next morning when she helped her mom prepare vegetables for the day's cooking. No one at her old school had known about her piano playing. It was something private, something that belonged just to her, and no one here would know either, Lynn decided as she stood before the grand piano, still not quite brave enough to sit on the bench. "What do you think you're doing?" The sharp voice made Lynn jump back from the piano as if it had burned her. She turned to see 4 students standing at the door, 3 girls and a boy, all looking at her with surprise and something that quickly turned to amusement. "I was just looking," Lynn said quietly, reaching for her backpack. One of the girls stepped forward. She was tall, with perfectly styled hair and clothes that Lynn recognized as expensive brands. "This is the music room. Are you lost?" Her tone suggested Lynn couldn't possibly have any other reason to be there. "No, I heard the piano and—" "Oh my God," the boy interrupted, laughing. "Were you going to play it?" Lynn felt heat rush to her face. "I was just looking," she repeated. The tall girl glanced at her friends with a smirk. "That's a Steinway concert grand. It costs more than some people's houses." She looked Lynn up and down. "As if someone like you would know what to do with it." The others laughed, and Lynn clutched her backpack tighter, wishing she could disappear. She hadn't done anything wrong, hadn't even touched the piano, really, but somehow she felt like she'd been caught stealing. "I've been playing since I was 4, the tall girl continued, walking past Lynn to sit at the bench. "My parents got me the best teacher's money could buy." She played a quick, showy piece, her fingers flying across the keys with practiced precision. When she finished, she looked up at Lynn with a raised eyebrow. "What about you? Do you even know what a treble clef looks like?" Lynn opened her mouth, but no words came out. Of course she knew. She knew about treble clefs and bass clefs and time signatures and key changes. She knew how to make a piano sound sad or joyful or angry. But standing there with these students looking at her like she was something they'd found on the bottom of their shoes, Lynn couldn't say any of that. "I thought so," the girl said, standing up. "Come on, guys. We need to practice for the recital." As they began setting up music stands, making it clear Lynn wasn't welcome, she slipped out of the room, her cheeks burning with humiliation. She hurried down the hall until she found a bathroom, locking herself in a stall until she could get her breathing under control. It was silly to be so upset, Lynn told herself. She didn't care what those kids thought. But deep down, a small voice whispered that this was exactly why she didn't belong at a school like Westlake. Everyone here seemed to have their place, their talents on display for all to see. Lynn's talent remained hidden in a dark storage room above a Chinese restaurant. By the end of the day, Lynn was exhausted from the effort of trying to be invisible. As she walked home, taking the long route that passed through the park, she thought about the grand piano in the music room. Despite the horrible encounter, she couldn't stop imagining what it would feel like to really play it. To let her fingers dance across those perfect keys, at home. After helping her parents with the dinner rush, Lynn slipped into the storage room and sat at her grandmother's old piano. The familiar smell of aged wood and dust welcomed her. She played softly at first, then with growing intensity, pouring all the frustration and loneliness of the day into the music. Her grandmother had taught her the basics before she passed away, and Lynn had promised to keep playing. "Music speaks when words fail," her grandmother used to say. Tonight, Lynn's music spoke of belonging and not belonging, of dreams too big for her small world. She played until her fingers ached and her eyes grew heavy. Tomorrow would be another day at Westlake, another day of feeling out of place. But here in this tiny room with her faithful old piano, Lynn was exactly where she belonged. What she didn't know, as she finally closed the piano lid and went to bed, was that in a few weeks' time everything would change. The very thing that set her apart would be the thing that brought her into the light. But for now, as she drifted off to sleep, Lynn was just a girl with a secret talent, dreaming of a piano she wasn't supposed to touch. 2 weeks had passed since Lynn's first day at Westlake Academy, and little had changed. She still ate lunch alone, still kept her head down in the hallways, and still felt the weight of not belonging pressing on her shoulders. The only difference was that now she had names to go with the faces of those who had mocked her in the music room. Violet, the tall girl with the perfect hair who played piano. Thomas, the boy who had laughed at her. And their friends Zoe and Isabel. Lynn learned to avoid that hallway during her free period. She found a quiet corner in the library instead, where she could study without drawing attention to herself. But sometimes when the library was too quiet and her thoughts too loud, she would close her eyes and imagine her fingers on piano keys, playing the pieces she knew by heart. At home, things followed their usual rhythm. Lynn's parents worked from morning until night, preparing food, serving customers, and managing the small restaurant that was their livelihood. After school, Lynn would help take orders or deliver food to nearby offices before settling into her homework at a corner table during the slow hours. "How is your new school?" her father asked one evening as they cleaned up after closing. His English was heavily accented but clear, his hands rough from years of hard work. "It's fine," Lynn answered, not wanting to worry him. "The classes are good." Her mother glanced up from counting the day's earnings, her tired eyes seeing more than Lynn wanted to reveal. "You don't look happy," she said in Mandarin. "Are the other children not nice?" Lynn shrugged. "They're just different from me. They have different lives." She didn't mention Violet or the others, didn't tell her parents about feeling like an outsider. They had worked so hard to get her into Westlake, saving every extra dollar for years to afford the partial scholarship that covered most, but not all, of the expensive tuition. "Give it time," her father said, patting her shoulder. "You are smart. You will find your place." After finishing her chores, Lynn retreated to the storage room where her grandmother's piano waited. This small space, lit by a single lamp, had become her sanctuary. Shelves lined with supplies for the restaurant. Extra plates, napkins, bags of rice surrounded the old upright piano that had followed them from apartment to apartment as the family moved around trying to find their footing in America. Lynn sat on the wooden bench and let her fingers rest on the keys. Unlike the gleaming Steinway at school, this piano was worn, its black and white keys yellowed with age. But it was hers, a connection to her grandmother who had first taught her to play when she was barely tall enough to reach the pedals. She began to play softly, a Chopin nocturne that always calmed her mind. The music flowed from her fingers naturally, as if the melody lived inside her and the piano was merely giving it voice. Lynn closed her eyes, swaying slightly as the piece built to its emotional peak, her small body somehow containing all the feeling the music demanded. What Lynn didn't know, couldn't know, was that her mother stood quietly in the doorway, watching with a mixture of pride and sadness. She saw how her daughter transformed when she played, how the worried look that had shadowed her face since starting at Westlake disappeared, replaced by an expression of pure concentration and joy. Later that night, after Lynn had gone to bed, her parents talked in hushed voices at their small kitchen table. "She is unhappy at the new school," her mother said, pouring tea into chipped cups. "Maybe we made a mistake." Lynn's father shook his head. "Westlake will give her opportunities we never had. She will adjust, but at what cost? You see how she plays that piano like it's the only thing that makes her happy anymore." She paused, then added, "We should have found a way to give her proper lessons. We barely had enough for rent. For food," he reminded her gently, "and now the school. It takes everything extra we have." They sat in silence, the weight of their sacrifice hanging between them. Neither said what they both knew, that they had given up their own dreams so that Lynn could have a chance at something better. The next morning at school, Lynn was surprised when Ms. Howard, her English teacher, asked her to stay after class. "I've been reading your essays," Ms. Howard said when the other students had filed out. "You have a wonderful way with words, Lynn, very expressive." Lynn looked down at her shoes. "Thank you. I especially liked your piece about music," Ms. Howard continued. "The way you described what it feels like to play piano, it was quite moving." Lynn's head snapped up in surprise. The assignment had been to write about something they were passionate about. Lynn had chosen music without thinking, pouring her feelings onto the page in a way she never would have dared speak aloud. "Do you take lessons?" Ms. Howard asked. Lynn shook her head. "Not really. My grandmother taught me when I was little, before she died, and now I teach myself. With videos and books from the library." Ms. Howard looked impressed. "That takes dedication. You know, the school has a winter recital coming up in about 2 months. Students showcase their talents. You should consider participating." Lynn's stomach clenched at the thought. "I don't think so," she said quickly. I don't play like the other students here." "How do you know if you've never heard them all play?" Ms. Howard smiled kindly. "Just think about it. The sign-up sheet will be posted next week in the music room." Throughout the day, Lynn couldn't stop thinking about the recital. The idea of playing in front of the entire school, in front of Violet and her friends, made her feel physically ill. But another part of her, a tiny voice deep inside, whispered, "What if?" During lunch, Lynn took a chance and walked past the music room. The door was open and she could hear someone practicing. A violin this time, playing a piece she recognized as Bach. She slowed her steps, drawn by the music. Inside, a boy she didn't recognize was playing, his eyes closed in concentration. Lynn stood in the hallway listening until the piece ended. "That was really good," she said without thinking when he lowered his violin. The boy turned, surprised to find someone watching. He was about Lynn's age, with glasses and curly hair. "Thanks," he said. "I'm still working on the middle section." It's giving me trouble. The fingering is tricky there. Lynn agreed, then immediately regretted speaking. What did she know about violin fingering? But the boy just nodded. Exactly. I'm Raj, by the way. He didn't say it like a question, didn't look at her like she didn't belong there. Lynn, she replied. Are you playing that for the winter recital? If I can get it right by then, Raj said with a small laugh. Are you performing? Before she could answer, voices approached from the hallway. Familiar voices. Lynn stepped back. I have to go, she mumbled, hurrying away just as Violet and her friends entered the room. That evening, Lynn played for longer than usual, working through piece after piece, challenging herself with music she'd been practicing for months. The Chopin Ballade No. 1 was the hardest, full of technical challenges and emotional complexity. She'd watched dozens of videos of famous pianists performing it, studying their hand positions and expressions, trying to understand how they brought such power from the instrument. Her own version was still rough in places, her self-taught technique sometimes failing her in the most difficult passages. But there was something in her playing, a raw emotion that came from somewhere deep within, that made the music come alive even when her fingers stumbled. As she played the final notes, Lynn became aware of her parents standing in the doorway again, listening. Her father had tears in his eyes. That was beautiful, Lynn, he said softly. Your grandmother would be so proud. Her mother came and sat beside her on the bench. Ms. Howard called today, she said, surprising Lynn. She told us about the recital. Lynn's heart sank. I'm not going to do it. Why not? You play so beautifully. It's different at school, Lynn tried to explain. The other kids, they've had lessons their whole lives. Their parents bought them expensive pianos and hired the best teachers. They'd laugh at me. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then she took Lynn's hands in hers, running her thumb over the calluses that had formed on Lynn's fingertips from hours of practice. When we came to America, she said, many people laughed at us, at our accent, at the way we dressed, at our food. But we didn't stop cooking, did we? Lynn shook her head. Your music is like our cooking, her mother continued. It doesn't matter if someone else thinks they can do it better. What matters is that it comes from your heart. Later that night, Lynn lay in bed thinking about her mother's words. She thought about the recital, about playing the ballade in front of everyone. The idea still terrified her, but mixed with the fear was something new, a tiny spark of possibility. What if, just what if, she could show them what she could do? What if her music, born in this tiny storage room above a Chinese restaurant, could fill that fancy school auditorium and make them really see her for the first time? Lynn rolled over, burying her face in her pillow. She hadn't decided anything yet. But as she drifted off to sleep, her fingers moved slightly, playing invisible keys, practicing even in her dreams. For 3 days, Lynn walked past the sign-up sheet for the winter recital without stopping. Each time she would slow her steps just enough to see the growing list of names, then hurry on before anyone noticed her interest. Violet's name was at the top of the list, of course, along with the title of her piece, a Mozart sonata that Lynn knew was challenging but impressive. On the 4th day, Lynn found herself alone in the hallway during her free period. The music room door was closed, no sounds coming from within. The sign-up sheet hung on the wall beside it, a simple piece of paper that somehow seemed as intimidating as a mountain. Lynn approached it slowly, reading through the names again. 15 students had signed up already. Most were names she didn't recognize, but she saw Raj listed to perform the Bach piece she'd heard him practicing. Before she could change her mind, Lynn pulled a pen from her backpack. Her hand trembled slightly as she added her name to the bottom of the list. In the space for her piece, she carefully wrote, Chopin, Ballade No. 1 in G minor, Opern 23. As soon as she finished writing, a cold feeling of dread washed over her. What had she done? She glanced around to make sure no one had seen her, then hurried away, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. At lunch, Lynn sat in her usual corner, unable to eat as she thought about what she'd just committed to. The ballade was one of the most difficult pieces in the piano repertoire. Professional pianists struggled with it. What made her think she could play it in front of an audience? She was so lost in her worried thoughts that she didn't notice someone approaching until they were standing right in front of her. Is this seat taken? Raj asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. Lynn shook her head, surprised. No one had ever asked to sit with her before. Raj set down his tray and settled into the chair. "I saw your name on the sign-up sheet," he said without preamble. "You're playing the Chopin Ballade?" Lynn felt her face grow warm. "I shouldn't have put that. I'm going to erase it." "Why?" "It's a great piece. It's too hard." "I'm not good enough." Raj tilted his head, studying her. "How do you know? I've never even heard you play." "Trust me," Lynn said, pushing her food around on her tray. "Everyone else has had years of lessons with fancy teachers. I just play on my grandmother's old piano. So, some of the best musicians I know are self-taught." Raj took a bite of his sandwich. "My dad says technique can be learned, but feeling comes from the heart." Lynn looked up at him, curious despite her embarrassment. "Your dad is a musician?" "He plays sitar in a fusion band. Classical Indian music mixed with jazz." Raj grinned. "He wanted me to play sitar too, but I fell in love with the violin instead." Nearly broke his heart. For the first time in weeks, Lynn found herself smiling. "My grandmother taught me piano when I was little. When she got sick, she made me promise I would keep playing." They talked until the lunch period ended, Lynn gradually relaxing as Raj shared stories about his own mistakes during past recitals. He didn't seem to care that she wore the same 3 outfits to school, or that her parents ran a Chinese restaurant. He just talked to her like she was normal, like she belonged. That afternoon, as Lynn was walking to her final class, she heard laughter from around the corner. She recognized Violet's voice immediately. "Did you see who signed up for the recital? That quiet Chinese girl? And she's playing the Chopin Ballade. Isn't that like super hard?" Thomas asked. "It's one of the most technically difficult pieces in the classical repertoire," Violet replied, her voice dripping with condescension. "I've been working on it with my teacher, but it's not performance ready yet. There's no way she can play it. Maybe she doesn't know how hard it is," Zoe suggested. Violet laughed again. "Or maybe she's delusional. This should be entertaining at least." Lynn pressed herself against the wall, heart racing, wishing she could disappear. They were right. She was delusional to think she could do this. She should go erase her name right now. But another voice inside her, a voice that sounded strangely like her grandmother's, whispered, "Or maybe you could prove them wrong." The next day after school, Lynn lingered in the hallway near the music room, gathering her courage. The winter recital was only 6 weeks away. If she was really going to do this, she needed to practice on a proper piano at least a few times. The door to the music room opened, and Ms. Winters, the music teacher, emerged. She was a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and a perpetually serious expression. Lynn had never spoken to her before. "Excuse me," Lynn said, her voice barely audible. "I was wondering, is it possible to use the piano for practice sometimes?" Ms. Winters looked down at her with raised eyebrows. "The practice rooms are available to students in the music program." "I'm not in the program, but I signed up for the recital," Lynn explained. "I don't have a good piano at home." "You're on the recital list?" Ms. Winters checked the clipboard she was carrying. "Ah, Lin Chen, the Chopin Ballade." Lynn nodded, bracing herself for disbelief or dismissal. Instead, Ms. Winters regarded her with interest. "That's an ambitious choice. Have you performed it before?" "No, but I've been working on it for almost a year." "I see. Well, practice room B is free most days after 4:30 when the chamber orchestra finishes. You can use it then." Lynn blinked in surprise. "Thank you. I'll need to hear you play first," Ms. Winters added. "Tomorrow after school. Just to make sure you're prepared for this undertaking." That night, Lynn practiced longer than usual, playing the ballad over and over until her parents gently insisted she go to bed. She fell asleep with the music still running through her head, her fingers twitching under her blanket. The next day dragged by slowly, each class seeming to last forever. When the final bell rang, Lynn made her way to the music room, her stomach in knots. Ms. Winters was waiting for her. "Show me what you can do," she said simply, gesturing to the grand piano. Lynn sat at the bench, taking a moment to adjust its height. The piano keys gleamed under the room's bright lights, so different from her dimly lit storage room at home. She took a deep breath, placed her hands on the keys, and began to play. The opening notes of the ballade filled the room, soft and questioning at first, then building in intensity. Lynn lost herself in the music as she always did, forgetting Ms. Winters, forgetting her fears, forgetting everything except the story the music was telling, a story of longing and hope, of struggle and triumph. When she finished, Lynn sat very still, her hands resting lightly on the keys. The final notes hung in the air for a moment before fading away. Ms. Winters was silent for so long that Lynn finally looked up, afraid of what she might see. The teacher's expression was unreadable. "Who has been teaching you?" she asked finally. "No one really. My grandmother taught me the basics. Then I just kept playing." Ms. Winters nodded slowly. "Your technique is unorthodox. There are flaws in your fingering and your pedaling needs refinement." She paused. "But you have something that can't be taught. You understand the music." Lynn wasn't sure if this was a compliment or not. "Should I choose an easier piece for the recital?" "No," Ms. Winters said firmly. "This is the right piece for you, but you'll need to work on those technical issues." She checked her watch. "I have a few minutes now. Let me show you how to approach the runs in the middle section." For the next 30 minutes, Ms. Winters stood beside the piano, demonstrating proper hand positions and suggesting exercises to strengthen Lynn's weaker fingers. Lynn absorbed every word, every correction, grateful for guidance she'd never had before. "Practice room B is yours from 4:30 to 5:30 on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays," Ms. Winters said as they finished. "I expect you to use that time wisely, and I'll check your progress each Friday." "Thank you," Lynn said, hardly believing what was happening. As she gathered her things to leave, Ms. Winters added, "You might want to reconsider your performance attire as well. Do you have something appropriate to wear?" Lynn thought of her simple clothes, the same ones that had already marked her as an outsider. "Not really." Ms. Winters nodded as if she'd expected this answer. "We'll figure something out." Over the next few weeks, Lynn fell into a new routine: school, helping at the restaurant, homework, and now 3 afternoons a week practicing on the grand piano under Ms. Winters' occasionally stern, but always helpful guidance. At home, she continued to play on her grandmother's piano, but now with new purpose, applying the techniques Ms. Winters had taught her. Sometimes, when the restaurant was slow, her father would stand in the doorway of the storage room listening with a proud smile. At school, rumors had spread about Lynn's recital piece. She occasionally caught whispers as she passed in the hallway. "There's no way she can play that. Violet says she's just trying to show off." Has anyone actually heard her play? Raj remained her only friend, sitting with her at lunch and encouraging her when her confidence wavered. "Just wait," he would say. "They have no idea what's coming." As the weeks passed, Lynn felt her playing transform. Notes that had once given her trouble now flowed easily from her fingers. Passages that had seemed impossible became challenges she could overcome. And through it all, the emotional heart of the music, the part that had always been hers, grew even stronger. One Friday afternoon, after a particularly good practice session, Ms. Winters handed Lynn a simple but elegant black dress. "My daughter wore this for her first recital," she explained. "She's moved on to the conservatory now. I think it will fit you." Lynn touched the soft fabric, overwhelmed by the kindness. "I can't." "Yes, you can," Ms. Winters interrupted. "Every pianist deserves to feel their best on stage." She smiled, a rare sight. "Besides, wait until they hear you play. That dress is just the beginning of what you deserve." With just 1 week left before the recital, Lynn felt equal parts terror and determination. The piece was ready. She was ready. Now she just had to find the courage to show everyone what she could do. The day of the winter recital arrived with a light snow that dusted Westlake Academy's campus in white. Lynn stood at her bedroom window early that morning, watching the snowflakes drift down, each one catching the light before disappearing. Her stomach felt like it was filled with those same snowflakes, cold, fluttery, and impossible to ignore. "Lynn, are you awake?" Her mother's voice came through the door. "Breakfast is ready." In the kitchen, her parents had prepared a special meal, congee with all her favorite toppings, the kind her grandmother used to make before important days. Lynn sat down, touched by their thoughtfulness even as she doubted she could eat a bite. "Today is your big day," her father said, his eyes crinkling with pride. "How are you feeling?" "Scared," Lynn admitted. "What if I mess up? What if I forget the notes or my hands freeze? What if everyone laughs?" Her mother sat beside her, placing a warm hand over Lynn's cold one. "When I first started cooking in the restaurant, I was so nervous I burned the rice 3 times in one day." She smiled at the memory. "Your father didn't yell. He just said, 'Tomorrow the rice will be perfect,' and you know what? It was. The music is in you," her father added. It has been there since you were small. Trust it to come out when you need it. Lynn nodded, grateful for their support but still uncertain. She managed to eat a little breakfast before getting ready for school. The recital wasn't until 7 that evening, but the day stretched before her like an endless road. At school, the hallways buzzed with excitement about the event. Posters hung on walls announcing the Westlake Academy Winter Showcase, featuring performances from the school's most talented students. Lynn tried to make herself invisible as she moved between classes, not wanting to face any last-minute teasing or questions. But at lunch, Raj found her in her usual corner. "Big day," he said, sitting across from her with his tray. "You ready?" Lynn shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe. I saw you practicing yesterday after school. You sounded amazing. You were listening?" Lynn asked, surprised. Raj grinned. "The practice room doors aren't exactly soundproof. Half the orchestra was listening. Jin, first chair cello? He said you play better than his cousin who's at Juilliard." Lynn felt her face grow warm. He was just being nice. Trust me, Jin is never just nice about music. Raj took a bite of his sandwich. He said Violet should be worried. As if summoned by her name, Violet appeared with her friends, stopping at their table. Well, the two charity cases sitting together. How sweet, Raj rolled his eyes. Don't you have something better to do, Violet? Like practice? I heard you're still having trouble with the third movement. Violet's smile tightened. My piece is perfect, thank you very much. She turned to Lynn. I hope you're not too disappointed when everyone realizes you've been lying about your abilities. I looked up the ballad. It's one of the most difficult pieces in the classical repertoire. There's no way someone like you could master it. Lynn stared down at her lunch, saying nothing. Just a friendly warning, Violet continued. It's not too late to back out. Save yourself the embarrassment. After she walked away, Lynn looked at Raj with panic in her eyes. Maybe she's right. Maybe I should just say I'm sick or something. Absolutely not, Raj said firmly. You've worked too hard for this. Besides, he added with a small smile, I've got $20 bet with Jin that you're going to steal the show. The rest of the day passed in a blur of classes and growing anxiety. When the final bell rang, Lynn went straight to practice room B where Ms. Winters was waiting for her. One last run-through, the teacher said. Then you need to rest your hands and clear your mind. Lynn nodded and sat at the piano. As she had done countless times over the past weeks, she placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The familiar notes flowed from her fingers, each one carrying a piece of her heart with it. When she finished, Ms. Winters nodded approvingly. Remember what we discussed about the dynamics in the middle section. And don't rush the coda no matter how nervous you feel. The power comes from control. Lynn thanked her and gathered her things. I should go home to get ready, she said, glancing at the clock. The dress, Ms. Winters reminded her. Don't forget to bring it back. I won't, Lynn promised, touching the garment bag that hung on the back of the door. Inside was the simple black dress Ms. Winters had lent her, freshly cleaned and pressed. At home, Lynn took a long shower, letting the hot water ease some of the tension from her shoulders. She carefully dried her hair, remembering Ms. Winters' advice to wear it up so nothing would distract from her playing. Her mother helped her with a simple bun, then stood back to look at her. So beautiful, she said softly, like a real concert pianist. Lynn looked in the mirror, hardly recognizing herself in the elegant black dress. It fit perfectly, making her look older and somehow more serious. More like someone who belonged on a stage. Her father drove them back to school as darkness fell, the snow still coming down lightly. The parking lot was already filling with cars, parents, and friends arriving to watch the showcase. Lynn felt her heart rate speed up at the sight. We'll be right in the audience, her mother assured her, squeezing her hand. No matter what happens, we are so proud of you. Inside, the school was transformed. The large auditorium, which Lynn had only seen during assemblies, now had professional lighting focused on the stage where a gleaming grand piano waited. Students in formal attire hurried about, some carrying instruments, others reviewing sheet music in corners. Lynn made her way backstage where Mr. Phillips, the drama teacher, was organizing the performers. Ah, Lynn Chen, he said, checking her name off a list. You're number 14, right after intermission. The dressing rooms are down the hall if you need to warm up. Instead of going to the dressing rooms, Lynn found a quiet corner backstage where she could hear the performances without being seen. She closed her eyes and visualized her piece, her fingers moving slightly in her lap as she went through the music in her head. One by one, the performers went on stage. Lynn heard violins, cellos, flutes, and voices. Each performance met with polite applause from the audience. When Violet played her Mozart sonata, the applause was especially enthusiastic. Lynn had to admit she played beautifully, with flawless technique and precision. Raj performed his Bach piece just before intermission. Despite his nervous jokes at lunch, he played with confidence, his violin singing with emotion. Lynn smiled, genuinely happy for her friend's success. During intermission, she felt a tap on her shoulder. "It was Ms. Winters. How are you feeling?" the teacher asked. Terrified, Lynn admitted. Ms. Winters nodded. "Good. A little fear keeps us honest. But remember, once you start playing, let the music take over. It knows what to do." When intermission ended, Lynn moved closer to the stage entrance. Her hands felt cold and she rubbed them together, trying to warm her fingers. She could hear Mr. Phillips announcing the second half of the program. And now, playing Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor, please welcome Lin Chen. Lin took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. The lights were brighter than she expected, making it hard to see the audience. She could make out shapes but not faces, which was somehow comforting. She couldn't see if people were already judging her, couldn't see Violet's smirk or the curious stares. She approached the piano, adjusted the bench, and sat down. For a moment she just sat there, feeling the weight of what she was about to do. Then she remembered her grandmother, remembered the countless hours in that tiny storage room, remembered the promise she had made to keep the music alive. Lynn placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The opening notes were hesitant, just as they were meant to be, questioning, searching. Lynn felt her initial nervousness begin to fade as the music took over, just as Ms. Winters had said it would. The piece built gradually, growing in complexity and emotion. When she reached the middle section, the part that had given her so much trouble in the beginning, her fingers moved with a confidence that surprised her. The runs flowed effortlessly, each note clear and distinct. She remembered Ms. Winters' advice about dynamics, making the contrast between loud and soft more pronounced, letting the music breathe. As the piece progressed to its more turbulent passages, Lynn poured everything she had into it, all the feelings of being an outsider, all the determination to prove herself, all the love for the music that had been her constant companion. Her small body swayed slightly as she played, completely absorbed in the moment. The audience faded away. The stage faded away. There was only Lynn and the piano and the music they created together. When she reached the coda, that final explosive section that demanded both technical skill and emotional power, Lynn didn't rush. She let it build naturally, her hands flying across the keys with precision and passion. The final chords resonated through the auditorium, powerful and definitive. Then silence. For a heartbeat, Lynn remained still, hands hovering above the keys, the last notes hanging in the air. She slowly lowered her hands to her lap and lifted her head, suddenly aware again of where she was and what she had just done. The silence stretched for another moment, and Lynn felt a flicker of panic. Had she messed up without realizing it? Were they all just sitting there, embarrassed for her? Then the applause began. It started somewhere in the back and quickly spread throughout the auditorium, growing louder and stronger until it filled the space completely. Lynn blinked against the bright lights, trying to see the audience. As her eyes adjusted, she could make out people standing. First just a few, then more and more, until nearly everyone was on their feet. A standing ovation. For her, Lynn stood up, remembering at the last moment to bow as Ms. Winters had taught her. As she straightened, she caught sight of her parents in the third row, her mother wiping tears from her eyes, her father clapping so hard it looked like his hands might hurt. And there, a few rows back, was Raj, grinning widely and giving her a thumbs up. As Lynn walked off the stage, legs shaky with adrenaline and relief, she passed Violet standing in the wings. The girl's face was a mixture of shock and something that might have been grudging respect, but Lynn barely noticed. She was already thinking about the next piece she wanted to learn, the next challenge she wanted to take on, because for those few minutes on stage, with the music flowing through her, Lynn had finally found where she belonged. The morning after the recital, Lynn woke up with a strange feeling. For a moment she couldn't place it. This lightness in her chest, this quiet certainty. Then she remembered. The performance, the applause, the way the music had flowed through her without hesitation or doubt. She had done it. She had played the ballad in front of the entire school and their families, and they had stood for her. Lynn got out of bed and went to the window. The snow from yesterday had stopped, leaving the world clean and bright. Across the street, a man was shoveling his walkway, his breath visible in the cold air. Everything looked the same, but Lynn knew something had changed, not in the world, but in her. When she arrived at school, she felt the difference immediately. Heads turned as she walked down the hallway. Students who had never spoken to her before smiled or nodded in her direction. A group of younger kids whispered as she passed, one of them pointing excitedly. "That's her," Lynn heard one say. "The piano girl." In her first class, Mr. Bennett, her history teacher, paused as she entered the room. "Ah, Miss Chen, quite a performance last night." "I was impressed." Lynn mumbled a thank you, her face warm with embarrassment at the unexpected attention. She slid into her seat, aware of the curious glances from classmates who had previously looked right through her. Between classes, a tall man in a suit stopped her in the hallway. "Lin Chen? I'm Dr. Patterson, the head of the music department. Do you have a moment?" Lynn nodded, suddenly nervous again. Had she done something wrong? Damaged the piano somehow? "That was quite a performance last night," Dr. Patterson said, echoing Mr. Bennett's words, but with a different weight behind them. "Ms. Winters tells me you're largely self-taught. Is that correct?" "Yes," Lynn said. "My grandmother taught me the basics when I was little. After she died, I just kept playing. I watch videos online sometimes to learn new techniques." Dr. Patterson shook his head, looking both impressed and concerned. "Remarkable. But also a shame. Talent like yours should be nurtured properly." He handed her a business card. "I'd like you to consider joining our advanced music program. We could offer you proper instruction, practice facilities, performance opportunities. Ms. Winters has already agreed to take you on as a private student." Lynn stared at the card, speechless. "There would be scholarship funds available, of course," Dr. Patterson added. "Full scholarship in your case. Think about it, discuss it with your parents, and let me know by the end of the week." As he walked away, Lynn stood frozen in place, the business card clutched in her hand. A full scholarship. Private lessons with Ms. Winters. It seemed impossible, like something from a dream. At lunch, she looked for Raj in their usual corner, eager to tell him the news. But before she could spot him, someone called her name. It was Jin, the first chair cellist Raj had mentioned, sitting with a group of students Lynn recognized from the orchestra. "Lynn, over here," Jin called again, waving her over. Hesitantly, Lynn approached their table. Jin scooted over to make room for her. "That was some playing last night," he said as she sat down. "Raj told us you were good, but we had no idea." The other students nodded in agreement. A girl with short dark hair that Lynn vaguely recognized as a flutist smiled warmly. "I'm Nadia. That Chopin piece is a beast. I've heard professionals struggle with it." "Thanks," Lynn said, feeling both pleased and uncomfortable with the attention. "Have you been playing long?" asked a boy with glasses who introduced himself as Miguel, a violinist. "Since I was 6, Lynn replied. "But I've never had proper lessons." The table erupted in disbelief. "No way. How is that possible? You're kidding, right?" Lynn found herself smiling at their reactions. For the first time since coming to Westlake, she felt like she was part of a conversation, not just observing from the outside. Raj arrived a few minutes later, grinning when he saw her surrounded by his orchestra friends. "Told you they'd love you," he said, squeezing into the seat beside her. "Also, I won $20 thanks to you." The lunch period passed quickly as they talked about music, about the recital, about an upcoming symphony the orchestra was planning to attend. No one mentioned Lynn's family restaurant or her lack of expensive clothes. Here, with these music students, those things didn't seem to matter. As they were getting up to head to their next classes, Lynn spotted Violet watching from across the cafeteria, her expression unreadable. Their eyes met briefly before Violet looked away, gathering her things to leave. After school, Lynn was surprised to find Violet waiting near her locker. The taller girl looked uncomfortable, shifting from one foot to the other. "Hi," Lynn said cautiously. Violet seemed to be struggling with what to say. Finally, she sighed. "Your performance last night was really good." It wasn't exactly an apology, but something in Violet's tone suggested it was meant to be. Lynn nodded. "Thanks. Your Mozart was beautiful too. I've been working on it for months with my teacher. He's from Juilliard." Violet paused. How long did you practice the ballad? About a year, I guess. Whenever I could. Violet nodded slowly. Dr. Patterson told me you're joining the music program. On scholarship. Lynn tensed, waiting for the cutting remark. The reminder that she was still an outsider, only there because of charity. But Violet just said, we're doing a chamber music project next semester. My group needs a pianist, she hesitated. If you're interested. It wasn't friendship, not yet. But it was an acknowledgement, an extension of respect that Lynn hadn't expected. I might be, she said carefully. I need to talk to my parents first. About the scholarship and everything? Well, let me know. Violet turned to leave, then stopped. You know, I've been working on that ballad too. Maybe we could compare notes sometime. That evening, Lynn sat with her parents at their kitchen table, Dr. Patterson's business card in the center between them. She had explained everything, the scholarship, the lessons, the opportunities. Her father picked up the card, turning it over in his hands. This is a very good thing, Lynn. A very good thing. Her mother nodded, but Lynn could see worry in her eyes. The restaurant, she said softly. You help so much. With this music program, you will be busy. I can still help, Lynn insisted. Maybe not as much, but I'll figure it out. Her father reached across the table to take her mother's hand. Remember what my father always said? When a door opens, we must be brave enough to walk through. He smiled at Lynn. Your music has opened this door. We will manage the restaurant. Are you sure? Lynn asked. Her mother's worried expression softened. We came to America for better opportunities. Not just for us, but for you. This is what we hoped for. She squeezed her husband's hand. Besides, your father has been talking about hiring help for months. Now he has no excuse. 2 weeks later, Lynn stood in the doorway of Westlake Academy's smallest practice room, now assigned to her for the semester. It wasn't much larger than the storage room at home, but it had good lighting, a window that looked out onto the snow-covered campus, and most importantly, a beautiful upright piano that, while not as grand as the one in the main music room, was still leagues better than what she had at home, her own practice room. Lynn still couldn't quite believe it. She set her backpack down and sat at the bench, running her fingers lightly over the keys. Ms. Winters had given her a new piece to work on, a Rachmaninoff prelude that was challenging in different ways than the Chopin had been. Lynn was excited to start, to push herself in new directions. A knock at the open door made her look up. Raj stood there, violin case in hand. The gang's meeting in practice room D to run through some Bach. Want to join? We could use a piano for reference. From down the hall, Lynn could hear other students warming up their instruments, the discordant sounds somehow harmonious in their purpose and energy. She smiled. Give me 5 minutes. I just want to try something first. After Raj left, Lynn turned back to the piano. She closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of her grandmother, wishing she could have seen her play at the recital, could see her now in this practice room with her name on the door. Then she began to play just for herself, just for the joy of it. The music filled the small room, spilled out into the hallway, and became part of the tapestry of sounds that made up Westlake Academy's music department. Later, when Lynn joined the others in practice room D, she was greeted with warm smiles and easy conversation. Imam had a space for her at the piano bench. Nadia showed her the Bach pieces they were working on, and even Violet, sitting somewhat apart with her music theory homework, gave a small nod of acknowledgement. As they began to play together, Lynn felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before at Westlake. Here, in this room full of music and shared passion, she wasn't the quiet Chinese girl from the restaurant or the scholarship student who didn't fit in. She was simply Lynn, the pianist,